morning, ladies and gents. Okay, we're now week 4 of online learning. Guys, we're going to have 2 lessons this week, but they are pretty chilled, not too difficult. We started calculus, but we haven't even really got into calculus. We've done a bit of trig, and today we're going to have, this week we're going to look at the radian, just to do with circles. We have one more lesson probably next week about the radians, and then hopefully second lesson next week we'll start calculus properly. Okay, so what is the radian? The radian is basically a unit of angles. Okay, so the units that you've been working with angles so far is in degrees. Okay, so in one circle there's 360 degrees, and I don't know if you ever thought about it. That's quite a random number. What is this 360? Now why? It could be 365, it could be 300, it could be 200, it could be anything. Somebody made it up. Okay. The good thing about 360 is that it's just a biggish number. So we can differentiate between different angles in a circle. Okay? But it is quite random. Okay? So I'm going to introduce you to a more natural unit, one that you would use if you study physics. I don't know about engineering, but in physics definitely you will never work with degrees. It's always going to be a radian. So I've drew a circle. Okay? And we've got the radius, it's like a slice of a pie I wrote here, so that's the center. We've got 2 radii here, 2 radius, and we've got an angle theta, okay? And here we've got the arc, okay, which I'm going to use the letter L. Sometimes people will use the letter S, I'm more used to use the letter L for it, okay? Now, what is the definition of the radian, okay? Theta in radian is defined as the arc, the length of the arc, divided by the radius. Okay? So if I give the letter L for the arc, it's L over R. Let me just pause to see that you can see this blue color. Okay? So, the radian is simply the length of the arc divided by the radius. Now we can think about 2 things. First of all, we'd like to think about what is 1 radian. Okay, what is 1 radian? Okay, if I have 1 radian, the letter, for degrees we usually use the little circle above. For radian, I've actually never seen it before, but here in the book they use the letter C. I really don't know what that is. Maybe C for circumference. I'm not sure. So 1 radian is L over R, a certain arc divided by radius. And if you look at that equation, that really implies that if you have 1 radian, if this is just 1 degree radian, that means the arc is equal to the radius. So 1 radian is when the arc is the same length as the radius. That's quite neat, I think. Okay? The other thing, which is maybe more important, will allow us to help translate from radians to degrees and backward, is to think how many degrees are in a circle. Right? That's one of the things you need to know about units. So with 360 degrees, that means there's 360 degrees in a circle. Okay? So let's think about what is 360 degrees in radians. Okay? What is it in radians? Okay? Well, let's use the definition. The definition of a degree radian is the arc over the radius. Okay? Now in 360 degrees we're talking about the whole circle. So the arc now is the circumference. Right? So the circumference, what's the length of a circumference? Okay, you've learned that a million years ago. It's 2 pi r. Okay, that's the circumference of the whole circle. That's the arc of the whole circle. Now we need to divide it by the radius. Okay? So it's 2 pi r over r, and voila, you got the answer. Okay? So 360 degrees, okay, is equivalent to 2 pi radian. Okay? That's in degrees, that's in radian. In 1 full circle, we have 2 pi radians. The one downside here, obviously, is that this number is irrational, so it's not a nice integer. But this is the one you'd work in physics and in maths, I think. Okay? So what we're going to do now is solve some problems. Okay? So I'm just going to pause, make some space. Okay, we've got some more space here. So yeah, the first type of exercise that you need to do, I'm talking about exercise 2.1, is to convert from radians, angle from radians to degrees. Okay? So let's say we have 0.46 radians. Okay? That's the angle radians, and I want to know how much is it in degrees. Okay? So this is basically a question that we really do in grade 8 when we learned about ratio, and it's actually deceptively difficult. It's one of these things that I personally have to remind myself how to do. So what we got to understand that we've got fixed ratio between angles and degrees. They're linear to each other. What do I mean? Okay? What I have to do is look at this relationship that we just formed. 2 pi radians equal 360 degrees. So I'm going to write it down. Under the radian, I'm going to write down 2 pi. Okay? And that is equal to 360 degrees. Okay? Now, I know that 2 pi is equal to 360. I want to know how many degrees is 0.46. So what I do when I teach the grade 8, maybe you've seen another way of doing it, and it's absolutely fine. Okay? What I ask myself, okay, there's the same ratio between those two things. This number is not 360, but there's the same ratio, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask myself, how did I go from 2 pi to 0.46? Okay? And the answer is, I timed it by 0.46 and divided by 2 pi. Right? If you time 2 pi by 0.46 divided by 2 pi cancel, you end up with 0.46. And now if we have a proportional, these quantities are proportional to each other, then I have to do the same here. I have to multiply 360 by 0.46 divided by 2 pi. Okay? And that's the answer. Okay? So the answer is 360 times 0.46 divided by 2 pi. And I'll just leave you to do the calculation. Just plug in the calculator, just like that. Okay? Right? And that's the answer. Okay? Now, sometime angles or degrees, radians will be given in multiples of pi. Okay? You can see it here that the circumference of, the angle of a full circle is given a multiple of pi, 2 pi. What is pi? Pi is 3.14, whatever, it's an irrational number. So I didn't say that's equal to 2 times 3.14 because it's an ugly number. We often use multiples of pi. So in this question, I'll just move it up a little bit higher, okay, 3 pi. The question is, how many degrees is 3 pi radians? Okay, but again, that's pretty easy. I'm just going to erase this bit here, okay. So I need to ask myself, how did I go from 2 pi to 3 pi? And the answer is, I multiplied it by 3 pi divided by 2 pi. Divide by 2 pi to cancel the 2 pi. Multiply that 1 by 3 pi to get 3 pi. The same thing I'm going to do here. Okay? So the 360, I'm going to have to multiply by 3 pi, divide by 2 pi. And you can see, if I work with multiples of pi, it's quite neat, because really all I'm doing, I'm timing it by 3 halves, because the pi cancel out. So the same thing here. Okay? So 360 times 3 halves. Okay? I'll just leave the pi's. Okay? But obviously they cancel out. How much is that? 180 times 3, 540. 540. It's 1.5 circle, isn't it? 1.5 circle. And you should know that 3 pi, okay, is 2 pi plus a pi. Okay? Pi is half of 2 pi. So it's 1.5 circle. And I think at this point, another couple of relationships that I'm going to write down for you, which I think is important to remember later on at least. If 2 pi, 1 circle, 360, pi is obviously 180. Very important to remember. Okay? And half a pi is 90. And obviously a quarter of a pi is 45. Okay? So all these angles are the important angles that we know from trig, are just simple multiples of pi. Okay, I'm going to pause and I'll do another little type of question that we're going to do. Ooh, hang on. I've just learned a little trick. I'm going to show you my little magic powers here. Okay, so I'm going to change the board with a little magic. So, hocus pocus Billy. Look at this. New magic that I've learned. Raise the board. Okay, we're moving to the second bit of question where we need to convert to radians. So we got the angle in degrees, and we're converting to radians. Let's say we've got 10 degrees. Okay? 10 degrees. And now I'll just write it down a bit. 10 degrees. And we want to know how much is that in radian. Okay? So again, we need to write down that relationship. This is like your mother relationship. This is where everything is born from. Okay? So now I've got 360 here. I'm working in degrees. That is equal to 2 pi. It's the same thing as I did before, but I just swapped around because now I'm converting degrees to radian. Okay, and now I want to know how many radian is 10 degrees. So I'll do exactly the same thing. How do I go from 360 to 10? Well, I divide by 360 and time it by 10, which is like time it by 1 over 36, 1 over 36. Okay? The same thing I'm going to do to my 2 pi. I'm going to multiply it by 10, divide by 360, and I'm going to let you do that. Okay? It's 2 pi times 10 divided by 360. Okay? You just plug it into calculator and you get the answer in radian. Okay? So you can, some people maybe just try and remember that if you convert from degrees to radian, you time it by the degree itself. In this case, it's 10. And time it by the degree divided by 360. Okay? And the other, from radian to degrees, I think we're dividing it by 2 pi and time it by the radian. But I'd like to do that. I just remind myself every time. You just take a second and you do it. Okay? The last kind of question I can see in exercise 1 is to work with your calculator. So for example, you know that sine 27. So far when I asked you to do how to do sine 27, well, you just put sine 27. Okay, you know how to do that. I got 0.45. Okay. Now, we got to be a little bit careful. So if you look at these, they're under question 3. Right? And they wrote to you sine 0.5. But there's a little c above. That means that the angle is not in degrees, it's in radian. You have to just watch out now because there's 2 units. Okay? So you got to make sure your calculator is working with radian. And to do that, you need to go to the setup. Okay? There's a little setup here. Just write it down. Setup button. And to get there, you do shift mode. Okay? You press shift mode, you get to setup, and then you can see in my calculator, every calculator is slightly different, but I've got 3. If I press 3, I'm working with degrees. If I press 4, I'm working with radian. So you got to check what the question is. If you're working with, I erased it. If you're working with radians, sine 0.5 radian, you got to make sure you choose radian. Otherwise, you'll put sine 0.5 and 0.5 degrees. You'll get a completely different answer. Okay, so it's not difficult, it's just something to remember. Okay, that's it for today. I'll do the next lesson in a bit.